I want you to close your eyes for a moment and think back to a time when you truly loved yourself. A time when you felt whole, confident, and at peace with who you are. Can you remember that feeling of self-acceptance and self-appreciation? How liberating and empowering it was. Now open your eyes. If that warm feeling of self-love is something you can't quite put your finger on, don't worry, you're not alone. In a world that constantly bombards us with unrealistic expectations and societal pressures, nurturing a deep, unconditional love for ourselves can be incredibly challenging. But here's the thing, self-love isn't just some fluffy, new age concept. It's the bedrock upon which all other forms of love are built. When we love ourselves, we open the door to loving others more fully and being loved in return. Self-love is the greatest gift we can give ourselves and the world around us. I know what some of you might be thinking. How can I possibly love myself when I'm not perfect? When I have all these flaws and shortcomings, let me put it this way, you wouldn't expect a child to be perfect before loving them, would you? Of course not. You love them unconditionally, flaws and all. Well, my friends, you are that child. You are a work in progress, a beautiful, ever-evolving human being deserving of that same unconditional love, starting with the love you give yourself.
Spread love, man.
All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another deep dive with us. Today, we're going to be talking all about self-love.
Woo! Self-love.
We've got a great excerpt from a talk by Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Okay.
And I think this is going to get a really interesting one because we're going to kind of go beyond, the kind of fluffy, feel-good stuff.
Right.
And really get down to, why this is such a powerful concept and how it can really actually change your life.
I think that's important, because a lot of people think of self-love as this sort of like you were saying, kind of fluffy, almost optional thing.
Right.
But Dr. Dispenza, he really makes this case that it's like the bedrock of pretty much everything else, right? Like all of your relationships, your resilience, even like your ability to achieve goals.
Yeah, it's almost like until you really love yourself, everything else is built on, shaky ground.
Yeah, I love that, shaky ground. Yeah, he even compares it to the love that we have for a child. Like it should be that unconditional, that accepting, that fiercely protective.
Wow. That's powerful.
And so imagine looking at yourself with that same kind of unwavering support.
I mean, I think so many of us are used to being our own worst critic, not our biggest cheerleader.
Oh, absolutely. And that inner critic, man, that can really be a roadblock to self-love.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Dr. Dispenza, he doesn't say we need to silence that critical voice altogether. He actually says we need to learn to transform it.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How do you transform? I mean, is that like trying to teach a lion to purr?
Well, I mean, you think of it more like redirecting the lion's energy.
Okay.
And one of the techniques he talks about is cognitive reframing, which is basically, just a fancy way of saying that we're going to change the way that we think about things.
Right.
So instead of beating ourselves up for every mistake, we can start to talk to ourselves with the same kindness we'd offer to, a close friend or a loved one.
Okay, so instead of saying ugh, I messed that up again.
Right.
It's more like, okay, I'm learning and I'll do better next time.
Yeah, exactly. It's about shifting from self-criticism to self-compassion. And there's a couple practical ways to do this.
Yep.
First of all, try to notice those negative thoughts when they pop up. Don't judge them, just observe them. And then ask yourself if there's a different way to look at this situation.
Okay.
Maybe a more positive or helpful perspective.
It's almost like putting on a different pair of glasses, right?
Yes.
Like choosing to see things through the lens of self-love.
Yes, that's a great analogy.
Rather than self-doubt.
Yeah, and the more we practice this,
right,
the more natural it becomes.
Right.
It's like we're literally training our brains to be more supportive and understanding of ourselves.
I love this idea of rewiring your thought patterns, but Dr. Dispenza also talks about celebrating our wins, which seems almost counterintuitive when we're really struggling with self-love. You know? So why is that so important?
Well, I think it's about consciously shifting our focus, right? Yeah. We tend to dwell on our shortcomings.
Yeah.
But celebrating those small victories can actually rewire our brains to see ourselves in a more positive light. And it's like we're building evidence for why we are worthy of love and appreciation.
So instead of brushing off a small accomplishment, you actually, pause and say, hey, good job, self. You did it.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be a grand gesture. It could even just be like a mental high five, or a moment of quiet acknowledgement. The key is just to make that conscious effort to notice and appreciate those wins.
Yeah, I think a lot of us struggle with feeling like we need to achieve something really big in order to, like, feel good about ourselves.
Absolutely.
But what I'm hearing is that self-love is about appreciating the entire journey, not just the destination.
That's such a good point. It's about acknowledging, our efforts, our growth, our resilience, even when we're not at the finish line,
Yeah, it's like saying, I'm proud of myself for showing up.
Yes.
And doing the best that I can even when things are tough.
Yeah, and that kind of self-acceptance is so powerful because it allows us to move forward with more confidence and less self-sabotage.
This is making me think about kind of how I approach my own self-care.
Okay.
Because Dr. Dispenza also emphasizes setting boundaries and prioritizing self-care as essential acts of self-love.
Yes.
But I think a lot of people, myself included, sometimes feel guilty about taking that time for themselves.
I think that guilt stems from a misunderstanding of what self-care truly means.
Okay.
Right. Because it's not selfish. It's actually an investment in our well-being, you know? And when we're feeling depleted, burnt out, we can't show up fully for ourselves or for the people that we care about.
Right. It's like they say, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly. So filling our own cup through self-care allows us to be more present, more compassionate, and more capable of giving to others.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So how do we start incorporating more of that into our lives, especially when we're already feeling like overwhelmed?
Well, I think the first step is to identify what truly nourishes you.
Okay.
It might be a long bath, a walk in nature, reading a book, spending time with loved ones.
Yeah.
It's about finding those activities that really bring you joy and help you feel grounded and recharged.
It's like creating a self-care menu.
Oh, I love that.
And then choosing what feels most nourishing in the moment.
Yes. And just like with any menu, there's no right or wrong answer.
Yeah.
It's about finding what works for you and making that conscious effort to prioritize those activities.
I think that's a good point, the conscious effort part.
Yes.
Because it's so easy to just let it slip to the bottom of the to-do list.
Oh, yeah.
Especially
when life gets busy.
Exactly.
But the thing is, self-care is not a luxury. It's a necessity. It's about honoring our own needs and making sure that we're taking care of ourselves both physically and emotionally.
I like that.
Yeah.
This is making me think about another point that Dr. Dispenza makes about this connection between self-love and kind of how we nourish our bodies.
That's so fascinating, right?
Yeah.
He talks about moving away from those restrictive diets and towards a more mindful, loving approach to eating.
So it's not about seeing food as the enemy.
Right.
It's about seeing it as a way to nourish and care for yourself.
Yes, exactly. It's about listening to your body, choosing foods that make you feel good.
Yeah.
And enjoying the experience of eating without guilt or judgment.
It's a totally different perspective.
Right.
It's like, instead of, I have to eat this,
Yeah.
it's, I choose to nourish my body with this.
Exactly. And that shift in perspective, that is a key component of self-love.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that we're worthy of that kindness, that care and nourishment in all areas of our lives.
Okay, so we've talked about taming that inner critic, celebrating the wins, prioritizing self-care,
Right.
and having a healthy relationship with food. But Dr. Dispenza also talks about this concept of like rewriting the negative stories that we often tell ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, he's really highlighting the power of our thoughts, right? We often get stuck in these negative thought loops, replaying old hurts, anxieties, and those can really undermine our self-worth.
It's like we're trapped in this mental prison of our own making.
Exactly. But Dr. Dispenza says we have the power to break free from these limiting beliefs and consciously create a new, more empowering narrative.
Okay, I'm all for a good prison break, especially a mental one.
Yeah.
But how do we actually rewrite those stories? Like, where do we even begin?
Well, I think the first step is just becoming aware of them. Right. What are those negative thoughts that keep replaying in your mind? What are those limiting beliefs that are holding you back from fully loving and accepting yourself?
So it's about really paying attention to that inner dialogue.
Yes.
Noticing when those negative voices start to take over.
Exactly. And once you've identified them, you can start to challenge their validity.
Okay.
You know, are they really true?
Mm-hmm.
Or are they just beliefs that you've been carrying around for years, maybe even since childhood?
It's like holding those beliefs up to the light and asking, do these actually serve me anymore?
I love that, yes.
Yeah.
And if the answer is no,
Hmm.
then you have the power to let them go
Right.
and choose to replace those limiting beliefs with affirmations that support your self-love journey.
So instead of saying, I'm not good enough,
Right.
it's more like, I am worthy of love and happiness.
Exactly. It's about feeding your mind with positive, empowering thoughts.
Mm.
And the more you do this, the more those new beliefs will take root.
It's almost like we're planting seeds of self-love in our minds.
Yes.
And with consistent nurturing, they'll eventually blossom.
That's beautiful. And speaking of nurturing,
Yeah.
Dr. Dispenza also talks about the importance of surrounding ourselves with supportive people.
Mm.
Because the people that we spend time with can have a really profound impact on our self-perception.
So it's like choosing your own personal garden.
Yes.
Right. If you surround yourself with, like, weeds,
Right.
it's going to be hard to thrive.
Exactly.
But if you choose to be in a garden full of flowers that nourish and support you, you'll have a much better chance of blossoming.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
It's so true. We need to be mindful of the company we keep and make sure that we're cultivating relationships that uplift and empower us.
And that means setting boundaries with people who aren't supportive of our growth, right?
Absolutely. It's about prioritizing our own well-being and making sure that we're not allowing negativity or criticism to drain our energy.
This is all starting to make so much sense. Like,
Yeah.
all these pieces, the inner critic, the self-care, the positive self-talk,
Yeah.
they all fit together to create this, like, foundation
Yes.
of self-love.
That's a great way to summarize it.
Yeah.
And as we continue our deep dive, we'll explore how this foundation can help us navigate challenges, overcome resistance, and ultimately create a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
I love it. Let's dive in.
So building on that foundation of self-love, let's talk about something that Dr. Dispenza highlights as kind of a major obstacle,
Okay.
which is this tendency to compare ourselves to others.
Oh, comparison. That is such a thief of joy. It's so easy to get caught up in that, like,
It is.
especially in the age of social media.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It's like we've become addicted to measuring ourselves against everybody else, constantly checking to see if we measure up. But what's interesting is that Dr. Dispenza says this constant comparison actually undermines our ability to appreciate our own unique gifts and talents.
That makes sense. It's like you're so busy focusing on what you lack.
Right.
What you forget to acknowledge what you already have.
Exactly. And what's even more interesting is that this comparison game often leads to those feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt,
Right.
which of course further erodes our self-love.
It's a vicious cycle.
It is. It's a vicious cycle, but how do we break free from this comparison trap?
Yeah, it's so ingrained. Like, it's everywhere.
It is. Well, Dr. Dispenza offers this really simple but profound solution,
Okay.
which is to focus on cultivating gratitude for what we already have. You know, when we shift our attention to what we appreciate about ourselves and our lives,
Yeah.
we naturally start to feel more content and less driven to compare.
So it's about recognizing your own unique strengths,
Yes.
celebrating your own accomplishments, rather than constantly measuring yourself against someone else's, like, yardstick.
Exactly. It's about reclaiming our power to define our own worth, you know, and to create our own path to happiness and fulfillment.
This reminds me of another point he makes about those stories we tell ourselves. You know, those limiting beliefs that can really hold us back from experiencing true self-love.
He's really emphasizing the power of our thoughts to shape our reality. You know, these stories, often rooted in past experiences or societal conditioning, they can create this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, leading us to act in ways that just confirm our negative beliefs.
It's like we're unconsciously writing our own self-defeating script.
Exactly. But the good news is we have the power to rewrite that script.
Okay.
So Dr. Dispenza suggests that by consciously choosing to focus on our strengths and accomplishments, we can shift our self-perception and create a more empowering narrative.
So instead of replaying those old tapes of self-doubt, it's about creating a new soundtrack.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
One that's filled with positive affirmations and empowering beliefs.
Exactly. It's about becoming the author of our own self-love story. And it starts with recognizing those limiting beliefs and then consciously choosing to replace them with more positive and supportive thoughts.
It's like we're taking control of the narrative.
Yes. And this all ties back to that idea of rewiring our brains for self-love. It's about actively choosing to focus on the good, both within ourselves and in our lives.
I like that. So it's kind of like training our brains to look for the positive.
Yes, exactly. And that shift in focus can have a profound impact on our overall well-being.
Okay.
Now, speaking of that,
Yeah.
Dr. Dispenza also talks about the importance of surrounding ourselves with supportive people.
I love that he brings in the element of like our connections, right?
Yeah, it's like having a cheer squad for our self-esteem.
Right. Exactly.
You know, the people that we spend our time with, they have a significant influence on our self-image and our overall well-being.
That's true.
And if we're constantly surrounded by negativity and criticism,
Yeah.
it's really hard to maintain that healthy sense of self-love.
It's like being in a toxic environment. Nothing can grow there.
Right. But when we surround ourselves with people who see our worth,
Who celebrate our wins and support our growth.
yeah.
It just becomes so much easier to love and accept ourselves.
So it's about choosing to be in those environments where you feel safe, supported, encouraged to be your authentic self.
Exactly. And that might mean setting boundaries with people who don't align with our values
Right.
or
Yes.
who consistently bring us down.
Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to kind of step away
Yes.
from relationships that are draining or toxic, even if it's hard.
That's so true. It's about prioritizing our own emotional well-being and creating space for healthy and supportive relationships to flourish.
I like that. So it's not just about who you're letting in, it's about who you're kind of choosing to not keep around.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, Dr. Dispenza also talks about the importance of solitude in cultivating self-love, which might seem a little counterintuitive,
Yeah, it does at first.
but it's often in those quiet moments of solitude
Right.
that we can truly connect with ourselves.
Without all the distractions, without the external influences.
It's like hitting the pause button on the world.
Yes,
And giving yourself permission to just be.
exactly. And in those moments of stillness, we can reflect on our thoughts, our feelings, and our experiences, which can lead to a deeper understanding and acceptance of ourselves.
I think we live in a culture that often glorifies like busyness and productivity,
Right.
but those quiet moments are so essential for our mental and emotional well-being.
I agree. And they can also be incredibly rejuvenating. You know, it's like giving ourselves a mental and emotional reset.
It's like a reboot for your system.
Yes, exactly. So all of this makes sense in theory, but I think it's also important to acknowledge that the journey to self-love, it's not always easy.
Right.
You know, there will be times when that self-doubt creeps in,
Absolutely.
when we struggle to believe in ourselves, or even when we face resistance from other people.
So how do we navigate those more challenging moments?
Like, how do we deal with those waves of self-doubt without letting them completely derail our journey?
That's such a good question. And Dr. Dispenza suggests that we approach those moments with kindness and compassion,
Okay.
rather than judgment or self-criticism.
So it's about treating yourself with the same understanding and support that you would offer to a loved one.
Exactly. Instead of berating ourselves
Right.
for having negative thoughts or feeling insecure,
Right.
we can acknowledge those feelings, validate them, and then gently redirect our attention to more positive and empowering beliefs.
It's like being a loving parent to your inner child,
Yes.
offering that reassurance and support when they're feeling scared or overwhelmed.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And the more we practice this self-compassion,
Yeah.
the more resilient we become in the face of challenges.
So it's about recognizing that those moments of self-doubt,
Right.
they're normal. They're part of the human experience.
Yeah.
And they don't diminish your worth or your capacity for self-love. Exactly. And as we become more skilled at navigating those challenges, we actually strengthen our self-love muscles.
Okay. So it really is like any other skill.
Yes.
The more you practice, the better you get at it.
Absolutely.
And the rewards of practicing self-love, I mean, they're huge.
They are. Speaking of rewards,
Yeah.
Dr. Dispenza, he outlines some pretty incredible benefits
Okay.
that come with embracing self-love. You know, he suggests that when we truly love and accept ourselves, we unlock our full potential in all areas of life.
So it's not just about feeling good. It's about actually creating a more fulfilling, meaningful life.
Exactly. So Dr. Dispenza argues that self-love is the foundation for healthy relationships, greater resilience, even increased success in our careers and personal pursuits.
That makes sense. When you believe in yourself, you're more likely to take risks, to pursue your passions
Yes.
and to attract people who value and appreciate you.
And it also helps us navigate those challenges with more grace and ease.
Right, because when you have a strong sense of self-worth, you're less likely to be thrown off course
Exactly.
by setbacks or criticism.
Yes, it's like self-love gives us this inner strength and resilience to weather the storms of life.
Yeah, and to come out stronger on the other side.
Absolutely. And it also allows us to experience joy and fulfillment more fully.
Okay.
When we love and appreciate ourselves,
Yeah.
we're more open to receiving love and appreciation from others.
It's like we become a magnet for love,
Yes.
both from ourselves and from the people around us.
And that love creates a ripple effect, inspiring others to embrace their own worthiness and to spread kindness and compassion in the world.
So it's not just a personal journey, it's a collective one.
Exactly. When we cultivate self-love, we're not just transforming our own lives.
Right.
We're contributing to a more loving and accepting world.
I love that. And that kind of brings us to, I think, the final and perhaps most profound takeaway from Dr. Dispenza, which is this idea that self-love is a revolution.
It's a powerful concept, isn't it?
It is.
You know, it's about challenging those societal norms that tell us to seek validation from external sources, you know, to conform to certain standards of beauty or success. Yeah. It's about reclaiming our power and embracing our worthiness, flaws and all.
It's about saying, I am enough just as I am.
And that declaration of self-acceptance, that is a radical act. It's a rebellion against the voices that tell us we need to be fixed or changed.
It's about celebrating our individuality and shining our light brightly.
Yes.
Even if it makes some people uncomfortable.
Because when we love ourselves fully, we give other people permission to do the same. We become beacons of hope.
Yeah.
Showing the world that it's possible to live a life filled with joy, authenticity, and purpose.
This deep dive into self-love has been quite a journey.
It has.
We've explored why it's so important, how to cultivate it, and the challenges that we might face along the way. But I think, most importantly, we've been reminded that self-love is a practice.
Yes.
Not a destination.
It's an ongoing journey of self-discovery, self-acceptance, and self-compassion.
And it's a journey worth taking.
Absolutely, because as Dr. Dispenza puts it, self-love is the greatest gift that we can give ourselves and the world.
I love that. And with that in mind, I'm going to leave you with a final thought-provoking question from Dr. Dispenza. What would your life look like if you approached everything from a place of deep self-love?
That's something to ponder.
It is.
So as you continue on your self-love journey, remember to be kind to yourself, celebrate those wins, and never stop exploring the beautiful, complex, and ever-evolving person that you are.
And remember, you are worthy of love, just as you are.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into self-love. Until next time, keep shining.
You know, it's fascinating to me how Dr. Dispenza kind of ties all these different aspects of self-love together.
Yeah.
You know, we've talked about taming that inner critic, rewriting those negative stories, prioritizing self-care, surrounding ourselves with those supportive people. But I'm curious to kind of dig a little deeper into the why behind all this.
Yeah.
Like, what are the actual tangible benefits of really embracing self-love?
Well, you know what's so cool about Dr. Dispenza is that he doesn't just focus on, like, the warm, fuzzy feelings, right? He actually says that self-love has this ripple effect that extends outward, you know, impacting our relationships, our careers, even our overall health and well-being.
So it's not just an internal process.
Right.
It actually influences how we show up in the world.
Exactly. And one of the key benefits that he highlights is that self-love fosters greater resilience. You know, when we have that solid foundation of self-worth, we're less likely to be shaken by those setbacks or criticisms.
It's like having an inner shield.
Yeah, I love that.
To protect us from, you know, negativity that might come our way.
Right. And that resilience is so essential for navigating those challenges. You know, when we face those difficulties with a sense of self-assurance, we're more likely to bounce back, learn from our experiences, and keep moving forward.
This makes me think about how self-love might impact, like, our relationships.
Oh, absolutely.
Is there a connection there?
Yeah, he says that when we love and accept ourselves, we actually attract healthier and more fulfilling relationships.
So it's not about kind of seeking validation from others.
Right.
It's about coming to the table already feeling kind of whole and complete.
That is such a good point. It's a really important distinction. Because when we're secure in our own worth, We're not going to settle for relationships that drain us or diminish our sense of self.
Right.
We're more likely to attract those partners who see and appreciate us for
Right.
who we truly are.
So it's like we're radiating a different energy when we come from that place of self-love.
Exactly. And that energy can be incredibly magnetic. Dr. Dispenza also talks about the impact of self-love on our careers and our creative pursuits.
Okay.
And he says that when we believe in ourselves, we're more likely to take risks, pursue our passions, and ultimately achieve greater success.
That makes sense because when we doubt ourselves,
Right.
it's so easy to kind of hold back, play it safe, let fear make our choices for us.
Absolutely. But when we have that strong sense of self-belief,
Yeah.
we're more likely to step outside our comfort zone, to embrace those challenges as opportunities for growth.
Right.
And to persist even when we face those obstacles.
It's like self-love gives us the courage to actually go after what we want in life.
Yes, and that courage can lead to some pretty incredible outcomes.
I love that. And what about like the physical and mental health benefits?
Oh, yeah, well, he talks about that too.
Okay.
He suggests that when we treat ourselves with kindness and compassion, we reduce stress, we boost our immune system, and even improve our overall mood.
So self-love isn't just like a feel-good concept. It actually has a really,
Right.
tangible effect on our well-being.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that our minds and bodies are interconnected. And when we nurture one, we nourish the other.
That's powerful. Okay. But I think it's important to also acknowledge that there might be, some resistance to this whole self-love journey.
Right.
So what does Dr. Dispenza say about that?
Well, he brings up this really interesting point,
Yep.
that sometimes the biggest resistance can actually come from those closest to us.
That's kind of surprising. Why would our loved ones,
Yeah.
resist our efforts to love ourselves?
Well, he suggests that sometimes our growth can be perceived as a threat by those who aren't on that same path.
Okay.
Our newfound self-assurance might challenge their own insecurities or even disrupt familiar dynamics.
So it's not necessarily like coming from a malicious place.
Right.
It's their own discomfort with change.
Yeah, it's important to remember that everyone's on their own unique journey. So Dr. Dispenza encourages us to be patient
Okay.
with those who might not understand or support our journey,
Right.
but to stay true to ourselves and to our own growth.
So it's about setting healthy boundaries
Yes.
and recognizing that we can't force anyone to change,
Right.
but we can control our own choices and actions.
And sometimes that means distancing ourselves from those who consistently drain our energy or try to hold us back.
It's about prioritizing our own well-being,
Mm-hmm.
even if it means, making some tough decisions.
Exactly. Now, he also talks about the internal resistance that we might encounter
Okay.
on this journey, even with the best intentions, that self-doubt, that negative self-talk.
Right. It can creep back in.
It can creep back in. So how do we deal with those moments when we stumble or fall back into old patterns?
Yeah, that's the real challenge, right?
It is. And he emphasizes the importance of self-compassion. He encourages us to treat ourselves with that same kindness and understanding that we would offer to, a close friend who was struggling.
So it's about acknowledging those moments of self-doubt without judgment,
Exactly.
recognizing that, hey, it's part of the process,
Right.
and then gently kind of guiding ourselves back to that place of self-love.
Exactly. It's about remembering that self-love is a practice, not a destination. There will be ups and downs, moments of progress, moments of regression. The key is to keep showing up for ourselves.
Yeah.
Keep practicing that self-care and keep nurturing that inner voice of love and acceptance.
It's like, it takes the pressure off having to be perfect.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
Allows you to embrace the, messy and imperfect beauty of this journey.
And as we continue to practice,
Yeah.
we'll find that it becomes more and more integrated into our lives, influencing our thoughts, our choices, and even our interactions with the world.
I think this deep dive into self-love has been so insightful.
It has.
We've explored the why, the how, the potential challenges.
Yeah.
And I think what resonates most with me is this message that self-love isn't just about feeling good.
Right.
It's about unlocking your full potential and creating that more fulfilling and meaningful life.
Exactly. And as Dr. Dispenza so beautifully puts it, self-love is a revolution.
I like that.
It's about challenging those societal norms, embracing our worthiness,
Yeah.
and shining our light brightly, even if it makes some people uncomfortable.
It's about recognizing that we're all deserving of love, just as we are.
That's such a powerful message.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
Yeah, this has been great.
Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of self-love. We hope you've gained some valuable insights
Yes.
and some inspiration to embark on your own journey of self-discovery and self-acceptance.
Keep shining, everyone.
Remember, self-love is a gift that you give to yourself, and the world will be a brighter place when you share it.